Okay, in this video I'm going to cover quickly just kind of what I went over in class in case that will be helpful for some of you. All right, so first of all, right, you can go to File, New, and these are the settings we want. PBR metallic roughness. You might have like ASM, PBR metallic roughness. That's okay, it doesn't matter, just as long as it's PBR metallic roughness. File, click here and find your sharp pencil sharpener, right? This should be 2048. And then the settings should look like this. Once that's done, hit OK. I've already loaded mine in here. Remember that the first thing we need to do is bake the textures. So here's a reminder of how to do that. Come up here to texture set settings, scroll down a little ways until we see this bake mesh maps. Click on that. This will pop up. Output size should be 2048. Check this box, use low poly mesh as high poly mesh because we only have this one mesh. We don't have any other mesh to bake onto it. Uncheck ID because we're not going to do that. Anti-aliasing, 4x. Match, keep this as always. And then click bake selected textures. When this is done, you should examine your pencil sharpener to see if there are any baking errors. And to do that, you can either, kind of look around here, but also you may want to look around here and see if there's like weird shading happening anywhere. Hopefully there's not. But if there is, it's likely, the most likely reason would be that your UVs need to be redone, right? Or need to be changed. Check to make sure that UVs aren't overlapping in here. Check to make sure that they're not coming out of the 1-to-1 space. Even textile density also is important, right? Okay, let's go over what I did like what I showed you in terms of setting this up for texturing. Okay, now that we've baked, let's create a new fill layer. I've just created it. I'll rename this to curvature overlay. Right click. I'm going to give it a little color thing to keep it at the top. Over down here, I'll turn off everything except for color. And where it says base color, I'll click on that. And I can type in CURV and find the curvature map and plug it in. You'll see that it overlaid it in the color channel, which will make all of the edges pop more. It is currently too strong, so we are going to change that. We'll come over here, change this from normal to overlay, and turn this down to about 50-ish%. You can change this as you see fit, right? In other words, if you think it would look better with more, you can do more, but very often it's just too strong initially, so we want to turn it down. All right, I'm going to click on this display settings button. Environment map, I'm going to use Studio Tomoko, this one, so I just type that in. Then I will scroll down. I'm going to check activate post effects. I will activate tone mapping, open this up, change function to sensitometric. Then I can activate color profile and change this to sRGBF, that one, and that's good. Remember that most of the time we do not want paint layers, so I'm going to select layer 1, which is a paint layer, and delete it. Additionally, in class, I suggested that you use folders, right, in terms of the different materials that are on the model. So I'll create one folder here, and remember that curvature overlay always goes at the top. I'll rename this folder to like rusted steel, right? Another folder. This one could be enameled steel. That's the back of the sharpener. I'll put that underneath, and then I'll do one more folder, and this is painted wood, right? Let's create another folder, and this one can be height information. All right, remember that if you have a folder selected and if you were to click on like create a new layer, if that folder is selected and I click on fill layer, it will create a fill layer and put it inside of this folder. Let's say that didn't work. You can always click on the layer and drag it onto the folder it should be in and put it in there. It's going to be best to organize, like to keep these layers quite organized. Your model can have, or your texturing could have pretty like unexpected results if your layers get out of order, and it can be challenging to put them back in order. All right, let's look at this fill layer, and maybe I'll call this upper lines, right? And I'm referring to the lines that run along the top here. Let's just cover the height techniques that I showed earlier. So I'm going to turn everything off except for height. And here I'll raise the height up a bit. We can always change this later. That way this entire fill layer, right, is raising the height. We can't see that because it's happening to everything at once. I'm going to right click on this and add a black mask. Remember that a mask is going to cover up all information inside of the layer until we paint or do something to get rid of parts of the mask, right? So it's a way that we can use fill layers with more nuance. So with this mask selected, notice that I can select the layer and I can select the mask. And each of these things have different properties, right? Here's the layer and the layer properties down here. Here's the mask and the mask properties down here. With the mask selected, right click, or actually 1 second. We don't need to do that. We can just do it like this. All right, so with the mask selected, by default, it's going to have it so that you can start painting on the mask, right? And if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see 1 is white and 0 is black. If it's white at 1, then you'll be uncovering portions of the mask, right? Like this. If it's black like this, you'll start painting black back on the mask and covering things up. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to go to white here, and over here I'm going to find a hard brush, like basic hard, and remember that you can move the light around by holding shift and right click and dragging. If you hold control and right click and drag, you can change the size of the brush. You can also come over here and adjust the size this way, right? So we want to make sure we have our reference open for this. So you can see here there are 3 lines that extend from the front, and then they get wider as they go to the back. And yeah, all right, let's look at that. I also noticed that I did something wrong with this modeling because I wasn't paying enough attention, but basically this is narrower up here and it's wider in the back. So that's something I would change if I were to do this again. Let's start with the center one. You can either do this in the 2D view, or you can do it in this view. Let's see where the front is. So here's the front. Maybe I'll use this 2D view because everything is organized nicely orthographically. So I'll click once and then hold shift and come to the end and click again. And that's not quite centered. Let's just get it. Let's try that again. That's close enough for now. Then we'll do something like this. This kind of comes out a bit. And then same thing over here. So something like this to start with, I can change this to black, right? And then kind of paint away and make these even like that. If I wanted to, right now this is very hard, right? We want to round them out, and you could spend more time. Right now I'm just going to do this quickly so we can kind of get through it. But I can right click on this mask, add. Let me make it so you can. Can I make it so you can see this? Well, you right click on the mask and you go down. You can't see it on your screen, but below here there's add filter. Click on add filter. Here's the filter where it says filter, no filter selected. Click on this and choose a blur, and you can see that it's going to blur your mask to round things out, and you can control the intensity of the blur here. All right, so that's one technique. We also have several decals, right? There's the Boston logo and then text right here. There's even text on the bottom, but I'm mostly concerned with seeing that Boston logo and the text right here. Let's cover how to do that again. Okay, here I am in Photoshop. You can use any 2D software as long as you get, as long as you're able to do the same stuff that I'm doing in here. I'm gonna go to File, New. I'm going to make sure it's set to pixels, and we want our image to be square. So I'm going to do 2048 by 2048 and hit Create. Right now it's square. I'll create a new layer. I'm going to fill it with black. Then you can always toggle this on and off, right, until you're ready. But essentially, we're creating an alpha, and the alpha, whatever is white, is what's going to be, the positive space, and whatever is black is going to be the negative space, right? So you could write, you know, you want to use the reference, right? So it's like Boston, all caps with the diagonal O's, right? And you could grab a different font, a font that looks close. Here, I'll just write demo, right? And in the middle, and then there's, I can use this marquee tool maybe to make like that flying V. And I think there's another letter elsewhere, but I can create another layer, fill this with white, right? Control D. So just try and get this as close as you can to the actual decal, right? So let's say you're done with that. I would take both of these and just, you're gonna want these to kind of, you may as well take up as much of the image as you can, something like this. And then you'll save this as a PNG and put it in your source images folder. And in Photoshop, you'll have to, if you're going to do a PNG, you'll have to go to export and quick export as PNG or export as. Okay, back in Substance Painter, we need to import the image that we just created. So over here, I'll click on this plus icon. This import resources folder shows up. I'll click on add resources. You're going to navigate to your source images folder and select the file. Oops. There it is. Hit open, change this to alpha, import this to your project so that it stays there. Here it is now, right? Okay, back in here, we could put this on the same, if it's the same height, or else we're going to need another layer, right? So let's put it on the same, I'm gonna put mine on the same layer for now. So I'll select this mask, right? And I'm gonna increase the size of this brush and scroll to the alpha. And you can either type in the name of your alpha, or if you have it over here, you can click on it and drag it over to where it says alpha shape. Now you can see it's going to stamp that. So if I look back at the reference, you can see it's on the front forward on the right side. So it's on this side. And I can increase the size of my brush, right? And maybe make sure that we're on white and stamp it in, right? Like old shift and click to check out where that's at. So you could do that for here. You'd probably need to have another layer down here or possibly another folder just for the two open, because those details, that cut in is much less aggressive and it goes inward rather than out. So you would want to have a different layer for that. And then lastly, as a very quick review of the other info we covered, you can either create, you can either modify, you can either modify materials that are in here, right, by clicking on a material and dragging it into like this rusted steel, for example, and then, change this to triplanar, adjust the scaling to something that you like, and then you can fool around with this stuff in here, right? That's okay. You can start this way, but all materials should be edited and there should still be nuance, right? In other words, scratches and rust and dust and grime and all that good stuff that we talked about during class should be present, right? And materials should look as close as possible to the actual material that that the sharpener is made out of. So you can also create your own metal, right? Let's go through some of that. If I create a fill layer, and what I showed in class last time is that um, you can use reference from online. So I could type in like steel hex code for the color, right? So this is what I find. Maybe there's a bunch, right? So the more you know about the metal, the better. I could copy this and change this to triplanar, right? Base color, um, paste that value in here, right? I don't want height or a normal or opacity or emissive. Roughness I can turn down a little bit. Metallic I can turn all the way up, right? I would name this like base metal. The next thing I did was to create some discoloration. Right, so here I turned everything off except for color. And where it says color, I clicked on that and typed in grunge. And then you can choose the grunge that you think looks good. And it's gonna darken it up quite a bit, but it'll look very different depending on which grunge that you do. Change this to overlay, the blend mode. Turn opacity down. And this grunge is too intense. Let's choose a different one. Yeah. And I'm going to change this to 3D only for a second so we can see it better. Turn this on, right click on this, add fill, change the color to whatever you want. I'm going to do this light purple. And I'll change this blending mode into overlay as well. There we go, now I can see that a little bit better. Let's turn this down quite a bit. And I forgot to, on the fill, turn off everything but color. There we go. I was like, why is this not working? All right, so I have this one, and maybe I want to play around a little bit with how much it's showing. Then I can duplicate this layer, and we'll choose a different grunge. Make sure it's set to triplanar. I could tile it a little differently. And for the fill, I would choose like a different color. Now we're starting to get some pretty good variation. Then I created another fill layer. Whoops, needs to go in here at the top. This one we can call rough pass. Turn everything off except for the roughness. Change this to roughness. Change this to overlay. And click on roughness. And I'll choose this grunge cobweb. And we'll take this down a bit. And I would do one or two of these. Cool. Then for the folder, once you have something, in class I did one more thing. I created another fill layer, called it noise, right? Left everything off but color, change this back to base color, click on color, type in some noise. There it is. We want this fractal some base noise. Turn the tiling up, change this to triplanar. and this will just kind of help blend things together a bit, and then change noise to overlay, and then crank this down just to help blend things together a bit. All right, so on this folder, I can click on this little box right here. Here's a list of all the pieces that I have. I can exclude all and then click on the pieces that I want to have this material applied to. So maybe something like that, right? If you don't have pieces in the fashion that I taught in class and like a bunch of this is all combined, you could take another route, which is to, whoops, leave this on include all, then right click on this layer, add a black mask, go over here to the polygon fill, and you can fill per polygon like this, or if you have good UVs, like I do, you can come over here and click on UV chunk fill, and then you can just select entire UV shells, right, like this, and fill them in. So sometimes it's good to mix and match, and sometimes it's good to just do one or the other. That being said, I'm going to clear this mask or remove the mask, and if you have pieces, this is going to be the better way to do it most of the time. So exclude all, select the pieces you want to have this. All right, so I have rusted steel here, but there isn't any rust yet. So underneath the noise, but above the rough pass, maybe I would, I can type in rust, right? Metal rust, pull this here so it's in between those two. And then I can play around with adding different types of smart masks, like in here, right? I could even search for what rust smart masks there are. So let's try this edge rust first. I can just drag it over here and see what it looks like, right? So none of these are going to be like something that you can do and just leave it the way it is, right? Ultimately, what we want is for our rust to look like it does on the actual model. So you'll need to utilize your utilize the images of the sharpener to do that, right? But I'll show you a couple things. So I'm going to undo some of these and just keep kind of playing around. Let's go back to this 3D only for a second so we can see. All right, so there's quite a bit of surface rust that is on the actual sharpener, and especially there's a lot up here. But let's say we start with something like this. This is a smart mask and it has a mask editor. If the mask is selected and you click on the mask editor, it'll pull this up and you can start playing around with like different attributes of that smart mask to get it closer to something that you actually want, right? So the one to start with would be global balance, like how strong is this mask affecting the whole thing? And then you can also play around with blur to like impact how much contrast there is. But feel free to play with all these. We can also do something like right click on the mask, add paint, and then now we have a paint node for which we can come over to our paint brushes and find find a brush to use like this Dirt 2, and I can paint away portions of the mask to continue to uncover where rust is supposed to be, right? And if I decide, oh, you know what, like maybe I painted too much rust in some spot, then I could come down here, change this back to black, and paint it away again, right? So starting off with a smart mask and then painting in the mask and having one or two layers of rust would be, potentially a good way to handle this. Yeah. All right. So you could go through and I also think this metal is too dark for the actual screwdriver or sharpener, I mean. So if I ever wanted to change that, I could always go back down to our initial base metal material, right? And click on base color, and I could start playing around with brightening it up a bit to get it closer to what we're looking for. Yeah. And then, we have this rusted steel, right? You could work on that a bunch, and then you could move on to the enameled steel. Generally, I get essentially like this far with a material, and then I will do every material and just get it sort of blocked out so the whole thing has textures on it, and then I'll come back and start adding things like rust, dirt, grime, that sort of thing. Um, all right, and then remember you can go to iRay, right? When you're ready to render, make sure there's not a background image turned on and that the image fills up the space. So I can come over to here, right? And where is it? If I scroll up here, I can change the environment if I need to, but most importantly, turn clear color on, right? And then over here, once it says done, then you can go ahead and see how it says done there. Now you can export this. If it's still grainy like this, you can always turn up minimum samples and turn up the time um, as well, and that will help. And yeah, okay, that's all I have. Reach out if you have questions. Thanks.